What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hawk Talk on Melrose YouTube page, where we are going to talk some Hawks. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share with your friends. That is all we ask, and let's roll. All right, here we go. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose following Iowa's 40-0 win against Illinois State yesterday. Man, it felt good to be back inside Kinnick. Felt good to be back in Iowa City. Tailgating on Melrose, perfect weather yesterday. And honestly, if you had to dream up a better first game performance, yesterday's performance was about what you would dream up. Now, yes, first half wasn't very good. It was a tale of two halves. That's what the title of this episode is going to be. But when it was all said and done, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And that was a damn good finish. It can carry some momentum, some confidence going into Cy-Hawk week. So got Tyler here. Tyler, what was just kind of, without getting too deep into it, because that's what we're going to do today, what were your first impressions of yesterday's game?
Well, I'll start off with this, Collin. I didn't know, I'll be honest, when I left that game, it's the most excited I've been in a long ass time. And I granted, we gotta put this into perspective. It's Illinois State, but just the game itself, I mean, you have the first half, like we mentioned, we'll talk about, and the second half, but leaving the game, I don't think I've ever been as happy as I have been in quite some time. I mean, it's been a hot minute since I've actually felt the way that I did leaving that game. It's just so fun to watch. And obviously, like I said, completely different halves. And yeah, the first half, different attitude than I did, that I had leaving the game. But you couldn't have asked for a better performance overall. I mean, 40-0. Colby, shout out to him. He kind of made that as a bold prediction that we'd score 40 points, and he was right on the money with that. So just not much more to say other than what a game.
We have to keep this in perspective because it's against Illinois State. However, I will say this is what we are supposed to do against a team like Illinois State. When you are one of the better teams in the Big Ten, which I think we are, and that's what a lot of people think, we're kind of in the top half of the Big Ten, you are supposed to play an FCS opponent and just impose your will and dominate them. That is what you're supposed to do. And for anybody that says that, because I have seen some of that on Twitter and stuff like that, you can't have it both ways. Because if Iowa would have ended up, let's just say 6-0 at halftime, let's say in the second half, we only score maybe a touchdown and we win 13-0. Then what are you saying? You're like, wow, you guys couldn't even do anything against Illinois State. So what else are you supposed to do? You dominated, you won. That is what you are supposed to do against an FCS team. So that's my first thing, because I do agree with people where it's like, yes, we have to kind of wait and see with this. We can be high, we can be pumped up, but until we actually, like this week going up against Iowa State, a little bit better of a defense. Until then, you can't get too high, but man, doing this against the FCS program, an inferior opponent, this is how you're supposed to look. And we did. We showed that.
We haven't done this against any opponent, really. I mean, Western Michigan, last year we put up the points, but not the amount of yards that we did. And the other thing is, like, really, I mean, it's really impressive when you think about it, because this is all in 2 quarters. I mean, the first half, we moved the ball like at the end of the second quarter, but besides that, we got a field goal up because our defense got the turnover, right? And gave us a short field. We didn't even convert a first down on that drive. So it's really 2 quarters that we dropped 34 points. And like they've said, all the reporters and some of these stats have coming out after this game. It's like we hadn't scored a touchdown up into that point in, what was it, 10 quarters of football or so?
Since Nebraska game.
Since the Deacon Hill QB sneak in the Nebraska game in the first half. It's like, so it's been a long time coming. It's just really good to see us lay the hammer down on a team, like we're supposed to, but not even that, just get back to building confidence with this offense. I can't stress that enough, how important that was.
So when you look at the first half, in those first 2 drives, I mean, I can't defend that. And you look on the screen right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, 2 punts, 2 3-and-outs, 3 plays, 4 yards, 3 plays, 5 yards. You can't defend that. But I just think the game plan going into the game, this is Cade McNamara's first game since last September. You're playing in front of 70,000 fans, new system. You're without your best receiver. You're without probably your best running back in the first half because he was suspended. And you can practice all you want, but until you get into a real game and you're playing a actual different team that is going to come in and be a little bit different than what you expect, you don't really know until you play. And I think kind of the game plan to start the game was, okay, let's just be as basic as possible. Let's get the run game going and just kind of settle everything else out that way. And unfortunately, it just didn't really look like that. Now, I will say, some people were like, man, we must have done a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments in the second half. But going back, I watched the entire replay this morning. We didn't really look a whole lot different in the second half. We just started executing better, and Cade McNamara looked more comfortable. He just looked, it was like he had to shake off the rust. He was very rusty. He was very tense in the first half. He had some throws that it's like, man, like he wishes he probably could get back. And if he would have maybe made those throws like in the second half, he probably would have actually connected. The two that come to mind is the Luke Lachey. Great play call by Lester. If he throws that ball more accurately and better, that's a touchdown. If not, it's a pass interference. I understand why they didn't call it. The defender never turned around, but it was so underthrown. They weren't going to call a PI there. If it was a better throw, they probably would have called a PI. Okay, the other one was that rollout. It was the play action rollout. Reese Vanderzee wide open for at least a 10-yard gain. If not, if he would have maybe thrown him in stride, it probably would have been maybe even more than that. But bad throw. Yeah. So I think of those two plays. I think of the penalties in the first half that just absolutely killed us. We had 6 penalties. And the first one being the one on the punt return with Caden Weegan. Great punt return. By the way, Caden Weegan looked great. He's not going to be Cooper DeJean, but he looked pretty damn good yesterday. And that's good. That's awesome to see. And I get like that play in itself wouldn't have helped the offense. But if we score there, like the momentum, right? The juice in the air, the crowd.
The feeling in the stadium is different. Yeah.
And it totally just got wiped away. I'm thinking of also Cade McNamara. He had that nice 15-yard run, but it was called back because it was illegal formation. Kamari Moulton had a nice run that was called back. Jacob Gill holding. The next play, Jacob Gill had a false start. That was not very good. 2 back-to-back penalties. So it just seemed like, another one, the strip sack on our defense where we would have got the ball at like the 30-yard line, but we
had like 4 guys around the ball. It just landed right back to the quarterback. Very lucky. Yeah.
Well, no, that play.
Are we talking about a different play?
Yeah, we got the ball back, but then they called a Jay Higgins holding call, which if you go back and you watch it, it was a horrible call. The tight end was holding on to Jay Higgins.
That's right.
So with all that, it just seemed like everything that could go wrong in the first half went wrong.
Yeah.
It felt like the Penn State game of last year where it's like, man, we just cannot catch a break. It seems like every time we actually do something good, it doesn't matter, penalty or whatever. And I said this to you at halftime. I don't know if you remember me saying this because we were pretty down in the dumps. It's 6-0. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. But right before half, we had a nice 10-play, 49-yard drive. Now, it didn't result in a touchdown, but we did get a field goal. And I said, man, at least we had that happen right before half. Maybe that gets us going in the second half. And boy, did it ever, because you get in the second half and you can see this on the screen. 6 drives we had in the second half, 5 touchdowns out of those 6 drives. Touchdown, punt, touchdown. You literally can't get much better than that. I guess we had a drive at the end, like way at the end of the game, but it was with like a minute left and we just ran the football, to end the clock. I really feel like if we had like 3 or 4 minutes left, we probably would have scored again, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not really counting that drive, but man, like that is exactly what you wanted to see. It was great to see.
Yeah, and I listened to the kind of the coaches, Seth Wallace, speak after the game, and that they asked all the players and him. He's like, "What's the difference?" And with Seth Wallace, I mean, kind of to your point, Collin, it's like the first half they just killed themselves on penalties, mental errors, mental mistakes. If you're Iowa, that's one of the things you pride yourself on is really not hurting yourself, right? And making the other team earn everything. And when you hurt yourself like that, you put yourself in a really bad spot. And this game was crazy because it wiped away just touchdowns and 2 touchdowns or a touchdown and then a turnover and just very game-changing plays. I mean, some of it's just like sometimes it doesn't matter that much. It's like, false start, whatever, 5 yards, but these penalties were killers. And then you ask, like, they asked like Cade, like, what was the difference? And he just kept mentioning like the tempo was different in the second half. They were able to kind of, run their offense, run it how they want at their speed, and really get into a nice flow. And you could see that with these drives if you're watching on YouTube. I mean, like you had mentioned right before half, the 10 play, 49 yards, 7 plays for 75 yards, 6 for 66, and then a couple where it's 4 for 77, 4 for 62, some more explosives down the field, which is awesome to see as well. So that, and then they brought up the play on Chris Hassel on Twitter and stuff. It's like once Cade was able to scramble, I mean, he scrambled like 3 or 4 times in this game, and he made unbelievable plays with his legs, whether it was scrambling out of sacks to throw down the field to Ortworth or to scramble for first downs. I mean, it was incredible to see, and I think that might have, shaken off some of those mental hurdles that he maybe was dealing with and trying to overcome once he knew, okay, this knee is good to go. I wonder if that had something to do with it too. A lot more confidence after that, it seemed like too.
Yeah, we always forget, maybe not Iowa fans, but maybe fans from the outside tend to forget that, Cade McNamara has not played much football. I mean, this is the first legit healthy game that he has played since 2021 or 2022 when he played that first game against Michigan. Yeah,
not to cut you off, but they asked him after the game, could you have done that last year? He said, hell no.
Oh,
said,
yeah.
I was not healthy as an Iowa player up until this point.
No.
So that's, we knew his quad, but we didn't know how bad it was. It was bad. He's not been what he is now in the last 2 years. So yeah.
Yep. He made some nice throws in the second half. That throw to Jacob Gill, if you go watch the replay, they had one angle. I think I sent you on Snapchat. Just a pretty ball. And where we sit at in the stadium, we were just so surprised, number one, that he even threw it because it was in a double coverage. But Jacob Gill made a hell of a play, just kind of cutting through those two guys. And it was a great throw. But what that showed me was Cade finally was comfortable enough where he's going to take that shot. Because in the first half, he was checking it down. Like those first two drives where we did 3 and outs. You can't really blame Lester. It was more just like Cade just kind of threw to the check down guy and got 4 or 5 yards and
throwing off his back foot. He wasn't, his footwork and pocket presence. You could tell he wasn't comfortable in the first half.
Yeah, and once he had that like 10-yard scramble that you're talking about, which was I think that drive going into halftime, that it almost felt like that was just you shaking all the rust off, and he felt way more comfortable after that. So going into this game, there was a lot of things I wanted to see, like if I could dream a more perfect game. And pretty much we did everything that I kind of wanted to see. So number one, can we impose our will? Now, we really didn't in the first half. Now, give credit to Illinois State. Their coach, a defensive-minded coach, was at Purdue a while back. He kind of knows Iowa's DNA a little bit. Give credit to him. He had a good game plan. He was crashing the edges, and they did a really good job. But as the game went on, we were definitely imposing our will. Once we got Caleb Johnson in there in the second half, because once again, he was suspended the first half, we looked really good. We were pounding. We were wearing them down. Exactly what you need to do against an FCS team. Cade looking comfortable. We just talked about it. He looked way more comfortable. That is exciting to see as we move forward now. We needed that to happen because go back to Kids Day, right? You had some fans in the stands. He just looked off. And then yesterday, first half, he looked off. And it was like, boy, come on. And for us, it's like, yes, seeing Sullivan would have been cool, would have been nice. But I'd rather have it be where Cade balls out, where that's not even a discussion now. Now that's not even a thing. And, as the game went on, there was maybe a few drives towards the end of the game where it's like, okay, should we put in Sullivan? But it's like, no, let's get Cade as comfortable as he can get. This is exactly what we want. This is like a kind of like an open scrimmage now against an opponent. We're up by a lot now, kind of do what we want to do. This is what we need. And that was cool to see. Getting over 4.5 yards per carry was another one, and we got to 6. Now you take away Caleb Johnson's long run. We would have finished still over 4 yards per carry, even without that. So that was good to see. That was encouraging. Can the offense or does the offense look a little different? And it does. I think everybody can agree with that. Now, yes, we still run a lot of pro under center, and we said that. That's what we're going to do. We're not a spread you out team. We're not going to be that. But you can see the wrinkles. You can see how it is different compared to last year. And then getting the wide receivers involved.
Yeah.
Man.
That was mine. That was my big one there too.
Getting the wide. Yeah. Because one of these days we need to start showing the outside world, showing wide receivers like, hey, you come to Iowa, You're not just going to be a player that blocks. We are going to get you the ball. And to recruit well, you got to perform well. And we got a guy in 2025 class, Terrence Smith, who is a 6'4" 4-star from Chicago, who, sounds like Iowa's in the lead there, but that's exactly what you need to do. You need to show people like that, show guys like that, hey, we are willing to throw the ball to wide receivers and get them involved. And yesterday, without Seth Anderson, without Caleb Brown, we did that exactly.
Well, to add on to that, Collin, I mean, another crazy stat that came out up until yesterday, all of last season, our wide receivers had 3 total touchdowns. The year before, crazy. We had 2 from the wide receiver position. So 5 in the last 2 years, and we have 3 touchdowns and a half of football from wide receivers in this one game alone. That is not only a just horrible stat for Iowa leading up into this point, but also just something, like you said, much needed from this group of guys that, like, this is, yes, I love throwing to the tight ends and I love getting them involved, but these wide receivers are your true playmakers and the guys that can really stretch the field. And it was really good to finally see that today on yesterday.
Yeah. Reese Vanderzee, true freshman. And I was listening to the post game coverage with David Eichel and Sean Bach. They've mentioned that Reese Vanderzee barely even practiced the first week of fall camp because he was dealing with an injury. So he
was basically out all spring. And
well, he came in August. He came in August. So he wasn't even here during the summer.
That's incredible.
Jacob Gill coming in early June.
Yep.
I bring up, and I texted Colby and Austin this, the fact that last year it took until the end of October to finally get a transfer wide receiver, our best playmaker of the ball. And in this first game, a touch. First game of the season, we get our transfer wide receiver, not only the ball, but we score a touchdown with him. He also had 2 catches, Jacob Gill did, that he got absolutely hammered, and he still held on to the ball. I think that's
crucial catches in that moment too.
Yeah, because they were both drives. Third downs. Yep. So that's encouraging to see. I really am high on Jacob Gill, and going into the season, I was really high on him because we were hearing a lot of good things about him. And I think he looked the part yesterday. Reese Vanderzee obviously looked the part. I said this a month ago. You were not on this podcast or on this episode that I said this. I think it was after Caleb Brown got suspended. I said, in a perfect world, because I didn't really think this was going to happen, but I said, in a perfect world, we look decent this first game without Caleb Brown, and we actually get some of the wide receivers the ball, because we're going to feel really good going into the second game knowing, wow, we get our best wide receiver back. We just did that without our best wide receiver. Now we get him back. I said that about a month ago, and I was like, man, that would be awesome to think. I didn't think that was going to happen. And it kind of happened,
well, you mentioned it after the game. You're like, dude, you realize we get Caleb Brown back and potentially maybe even Seth Anderson. This might've been a precautionary game where you hold them out, something that happened, last week in practice or something like that, more precautionary than anything. I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like we're not even at full strength in that position group yet. So that's awesome.
Also, what does it tell you that, when you have guys like Reese Vanderzee, who pretty much just came here in August, or Jacob Gill in June, that the offense isn't as maybe complicated as years past? I hated how that was a thing under Brian Ferentz, how the offense was just such a complicated offense, took over a year to really get it down. If that's the case, then your offense should be pretty damn good. And so when you see some of these guys that are just came in and they're already performing at a high level for us, for me, that feels like this offense isn't as complicated as years past, which is a good thing, because now you can bring in a transfer. You can bring in guys as a freshman, and they can perform game one for you.
Right. They want to come to Iowa because they know they have a chance of actually getting playing time early on, right? And that only helps recruiting.
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to pull up some more stats here from the game. Total offense, 492 yards, most yards since 2019 against Middle Tennessee. We only had 1 negative play yesterday. We went into the year. That was one of the big things with last year. Felt like there was too many times on first down we would get minus 3 or 4 yards. Drive killer. We only had 1 yesterday. We had 15 passing first downs. That was another thing, not being as predictable and, passing it on first down. 13 big plays for 285 yards. That's encouraging. 8.1 yards per attempt. Cade McNamara finished with 68% completion percentage. The goal is over 60. 251 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. We had 0 turnovers yesterday, which was very encouraging. 23 first downs. Our third down completion percentage was about 46%, which is really good. That's kind of where you want to be at. 7 for 15. We were 0 for 1 on fourth down. That was by the way, that was my only bad thing. My bad thing with Leicester yesterday. I know it's like cherry picking, but that was my only one where I was like, man, I don't really agree with that play call. On 3rd down and 2, we ran it, which I can agree with that because the hope is you get the first down or you set up like a 4th and inches or 4th and 1. I didn't really agree with just doing kind of the same play again on 4th down.
Right, if you're going to go for it, right, but mix it up a tad. But yeah.
Other than that, though, like the play calls yesterday, Leicester, I mean, I thought it was a hell of a day for the first game in this new Tim Leicester era. You take away the first 2 drives, it was really encouraging to see. Passing yards 251, rushing yards 241. Once again, we average 6 yards per rush, and then 12 yards per completion. So that shows me that, hey, we're not throwing as horizontal. And that is something where it's like, man, we got to get more vertical. That was another knock in the Brian Ferentz era. It just seemed like we weren't stretching the ball downfield. And that was good to see. And then this was one of my favorite ones, red zone, 4 for 5. That is really encouraging. Because last year we were absolutely horrible in that category.
Yeah, the other one for me, Collin, is 0 sacks allowed on Cade McNamara. I mean, that is crucial. I mean, there was a couple where, like you said, he could have been sacked, and he did it himself. He evaded those sacks, so it's a little misleading. But for the most part, the offensive line doing a hell of a job of protecting Cade, giving him time to throw. And then, what did I mention on our last pod with Colby? I wanted to see the completion percentage from Cade. Finally, 68%. I mean, that is maybe the best stat that I can see out of all this is Cade being accurate and extending drives and was scoring touchdowns, right? I mean, you just mentioned 4 for 5 in the red zone. We're 7 for 15 on 3rd down, which I will take all day. That's, close to 50%. And then, 68% completion percentage. I love that. This is probably just, I know it's again Illinois State, but you couldn't have asked for a better start to a season. And like I said, building confidence with this offense. I mean, you look at everything, you're really nitpicking if you're finding any negatives right now.
One last thing before we switch to defense, or maybe 2 more things. Caleb Johnson, man, he just looked the part yesterday. 119 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Unbelievable.
Comes in the second half, and I think he's running back 1. I know that the big talk was Kamari. I just think Caleb Johnson looks the part. We can all agree that last year he just didn't perform maybe as high as we wanted to, but man,
injured and
he was a little injured last year, a little banged up. If he can stay healthy, that dude is a beast. And
the other thing is we will do a running back by committee, and I think he'll stay fresh enough where he won't have that workload that'll just wear him down. But I agree. I think he's got the size, the speed, and the build to really be RB1. I mean, I like Kamari too. I just wonder, he's a little bit smaller, and running between the tackles like that, you just wonder sometimes, is he able to get down a little bit easier than a guy like Caleb Johnson? I don't know. Yeah. But man, he had a hell of a second half. Came out with this hair on fire. That's for sure.
Yeah, Kamari Moulton, 65 yards, 3.4 average. So it wasn't a bad day for him, but it wasn't that good. And then LaShawn Williams, and I think he's still battling that injury. I know he was out most of fall camp with a soft tissue injury, which I'm guessing is probably a hammy or something. 5 attempts, 9 yards. He didn't really do a whole lot, but that's what's going to go. Like, there's going to be games where one guy looks really good, the other guy's and then the next game, it's going to be that other guy that didn't really look good the previous game and then looks really good the following game. And then looking at the Iowa wide receivers, it's just really good to see, 2 wide receivers, 5 catches, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Jacob Gill, 3 catches for 46 yards and 1 touchdown. It's just really, like I said, really cool to see, because that is without arguably, or I shouldn't say arguably, without our top wide receiver. I think that is not an argument, because I think Caleb Brown is our best wide receiver, best playmaker. Yeah. But then you could maybe argue that Seth Anderson's our next best wide receiver. Maybe not. If not, at least top 3. So both of those guys being out and then getting them back. I don't know if Seth Anderson will be back next week. I know we saw him on the sideline before the game. And the good news is he's not, he doesn't have a boot on, doesn't have, not crutches. Yeah. I'm guessing it's another soft tissue injury, which those sometimes can be a little kind of pain in the ass, to to get back to 100%. But we at least know Caleb Brown will be back next week, which will be huge. All right, let's switch to the defense real quick because once again, gets overshadowed by the offense, rightfully so. But man, the defense absolutely dominant yesterday. Illinois State did not get in the red zone one time. The furthest they got was the Iowa 38, which is incredible.
I was going to ask if you looked that up or not, because we were talking about that at the end of the game. Like, did they even get close enough? Because obviously not enough to get in field goal range for them. But yeah, wow, that's wow.
One of the biggest question marks was the defensive line. How will they look, especially the depth at defensive line? We had 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. And then what you
Aaron
said,
Graves, monster.
Yep. Aaron Graves had a hell of a day. Yahweh Black had a good day. Brian Allen had a nice sack. And then what you talked about was the turnovers, and we had 3. That was the point of emphasis going into this year.
Yep.
And we got 3 turnovers. Should have been 4 if you take away Higgins' holding call. And once again, I want you to go back and watch that because that was a pathetic call. But 3, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I said on the last episode, I said if Iowa's defense can be better than they were last year if we can increase the amount of turnovers we force against opposing offenses. And that's been an emphasis from, I feel like, all the defensive coaches. They talked about it yesterday. That was something they, again, focused, hammered into the offseason. I remember hearing Seth Wallace talk in the interview yesterday. He's like, we went to other teams and programs and kind of asked, what do they do and to create more turnovers, and they got some insights and they implemented that into kind of what they did during fall camp and stuff like that. And clearly something worked because holy cow, the amount of turnovers yesterday gave our offense that many more opportunities. And I mean, you saw just the amount of, Jamari getting that pick right away really set the tone for the defense. And, Castro ripping it out. I don't know, just unbelievable performance. Not only that, obviously to hold Illinois State, like you said, is 0 points. I mean, that's tough to do because against any team, because any little thing can happen where they can put up 3, right? And like you said, to not even allow them to get in the red zone or Iowa's 35, that is maybe the equivalent of scoring 40 for the offense.
Exactly. It was a hell of a day. And I have it up again, the drive chart. The most they had was that 5-play, 43-yard drive, which that I think was the drive where they threw it up and the receiver made a hell of a catch.
On Nestor, yeah.
And then you see on the bottom there, some of those stats where, average yards gained was only 14. Average number of plays per drive was only 4. They had 0 10-play or 10-plus play drives, 0 70-plus yard drives. It was a hell of a...
The average starting position, owned 39 for Iowa. I mean, that goes to obviously the turnovers, but as well as like Weegan returning and stuff like that too.
Exactly.
Just gave us great field position all day.
Yep. So yeah, the defense looked the part. We were talking about it all offseason. Can this defense be as good as last year's? And once again, we have to keep it in perspective. It was Illinois State, but we did exactly what we needed to do, even on defense, right? We outperformed them. Guys were just making plays. Defensive line looked good. I'm still, like I said, a little worried about the defensive tackle depth. I did see Jeremiah Pittman in there a lot. I think that was kind of the focus point yesterday is let's get some of these backups in there, especially more in the second half to see what they can do. So that was good. Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, they just look really good. Jamari Harris, interception, that was cool to see. And then kind of rotating some corners, and which we talked about that was probably going to happen. TJ Hall made the start, but we saw Nestor in there at times. We saw Deshaun Lee in there at times. Cohen Entringer came in the second half at safety. So getting some of these guys that might have to play a little bit, some of these backups was cool to see yesterday. And that's exactly what you want to do against a team like Illinois State where, hey, in the second half, we're up by a decent amount. We can afford to do that. And then one last thing, special teams, Reese Dakin, punter. I thought he had a good first game. He had some nice punts. Nothing Torrey Taylor, but can't really ask for that in your first game, right? Especially as a freshman. And then Drew Stevens, obviously, with how it kind of shook up last year, was not very good, very inconsistent as the year went on. It was good to see him go 2 for 2 today, 1 from 41 yards and then 1 from 28 yards. And then we already talked about it, but Caden Weegan in the punt returner, he's not going to be Cooper DeJean, nor do we ask him to be Cooper DeJean, but he looked pretty damn close. And that was, like I said this earlier in the podcast, that was very encouraging.
Yeah, that's where some things never change with Iowa, and that's complementary football. I really feel like all three phases today or yesterday finally
everything
complemented one another, not just defense and special teams, but the offense did their part. And I mean, they asked Caleb, they're like, how does it feel to, score 40 and to really help the defense out? And he's like, he admitted, he's like, it feels good. It's not that we don't love talking about the defense, but it's time that they get some recognition too. And yeah, they deserve every bit of that.
And with that being said, great momentum, great confidence boost going into Cy-Hawk. As much as I want to talk about that game, we are not. We are going to wait until our next episode in a couple days going over that game. We'll talk a little bit about the Iowa State North Dakota game as we prepare for that game. I watched the highlights of that game. I didn't watch the full game. I might actually kind of did what I did with Iowa and watch most of that game, just kind of see how Iowa State looked. But we will get into all that. The next episode, we'll preview that. We'll predict that. But I'm just going to end it. Great way to get into that week. I mean, that you couldn't ask for a better way for just the confidence boost, some momentum, because the last thing you wanted was, like, let's say we ended up in the second half just still looking like the first half. Not only are the fans like, oh my gosh, but it's just the whole sense. It's like going back to 2 years ago when we only beat South Dakota State 7-3. It just, you went in that second week just kind of down in the dumps a little bit, and now you're feeling great. Like, you're feeling okay.
Yes,
let's freaking go.
There's, like last year, there was more questions than answers going into that second week. And I feel like we answered a lot of those questions at the end of this first game. So leading into Cy-Hawk. So, man,
I'm pumped for that game. I cannot wait. Whether once again, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't change, but it looks really good for Saturday. Pumped to be in Kinnick and pumped to tailgate, because that Cy-Hawk tailgate is always so much fun. So it's going to be fun. Yep, 2:30 game on CBS, longer, baby. So, can't wait.
Thing is insane.
Well, that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening, and go Hawks. It's going to end here. It's going to end here like in 2 seconds.
I didn't even know.